cold. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we have the cold here. It has snow. Now it's sort of back to rain now. So we're sort of in between things over here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we'll get started and we'll see who joins us as we go along this evening. So thank you for joining us this evening in our continuing class on the laws of kosher laws, kashrut as it's called. And this evening we're going to delve into the topic of Bishul Israel, or the when it comes to cooking, there are certain dimensions and parameters when it comes to cooking that also require beyond just kosher ingredients and kosher products. It also has to be an involvement, a certain involvement, Jewish involvement, so to speak, when it comes to cooking as well. And we'll address that and talk about different situations in relation to that. And then once we've gone through that this evening, we'll touch upon in the health aspect of our class this evening. We did a deep dive into the Mediterranean diet last time. And this time, we're going to talk about the very famous or infamous keto diet, the ketogenic diet that everybody's, sort of running after and trying out to see if that's going to be the miracle cure, and we'll see if that is, or the truth is, here's a little what's it called, a little reveal that it really isn't the miracle cure that everyone thinks it is, and we'll talk about that. Okay, so let's get on with it. So it's not uncommon, since I work for the COR, one of the main kosher certifiers of Canada, and it's not uncommon for food manufacturers to call us with a keen interest in kosher certification. And the truth is, they'll call us without even the slightest idea of what it takes to produce a kosher product. So what complicates matters even further is that they want to have basically a whole tutorial on the laws of being kosher and kashrut capsulized into a telephone conversation. And obviously we can't really give a thorough course in kashrut over the phone, but we can categorize practical kosher laws into three main areas: ingredients, equipment, and process. Those are really the three main areas. So occasionally, there may be circumstances where both ingredients and equipment are actually 100% kosher, and through through a violation of a rabbinic prohibition or a rabbinic ordinance, some foods or products would be prohibited, while other food products undergoing the very same process would remain 100% kosher. And that's really where we're going to sort of dive into those little nuances this evening. Now, this disqualifying process occurs when certain foods are totally and exclusively cooked by what we're going to call it. The term is Eino Yehudi, a non-Jew, and that really means is defined as a person who's not required by the Torah to keep kosher. That's really what we're talking about here. Okay, so a person that really is not required by the Torah to keep kosher. So for example, when a kosher raw chicken, take a raw chicken, a kosher one that's kosher slaughtered, when it's boiled in a pot of water by an Eino Yehudi, by a non-Jew, or let's say someone who is not required by Torah to keep kosher. So basically, that chicken now becomes as non-kosher as chicken is cooked in butter. Okay, that's the level we're talking about here. And our chachamim, our rabbis, call this qualification bishul akum, which is literally food cooked by a person that is not required by the Torah to keep kosher. Okay? All right. So there really are two reasons why our sages, why our chachamim enacted this ordinance of bishul, of being involved in the cooking process. The first one basically is a precaution against inadvertently eating non-kosher food. It seems pretty clear. And the second one really was a prevention against unnecessary socialization that could lead to intermarriage within Jewish communities, and then so on and so forth, losing the Jewish community in that sense and its dissolution. So now in situations where this idea of bishul akum, food again that is cooked by a person not required by the Torah to keep kosher, would present a problem, Chachamim have instructed us that this disqualification can be avoided in certain ways. So it can be avoided by having the observant Jewish homemaker or a mashgiach, a kosher supervisor, perform some sort of integral part of the cooking process, such as turning on the fire, for example. Okay, so when an observant Jewish person assists in the preparation, we say now that the food is prepared and it's now classified as Bishul Israel. Okay, literally, cooking or Jewish cooking, so to speak. Now, in order for the consumer to understand these important kosher laws, now we're going to sort of delineate the circumstances where the prohibition of bishul akum does not apply. So there are certain areas where the whole idea of food that is cooked by a person not required by the Torah to keep kosher doesn't apply. So here it is. So the prohibition of bishul akum does not apply to, here we go, the first category, for foods that can be eaten raw. Again, foods that can be eaten raw. So this applies to food that tastes better cooked or baked even, rather than raw. So for example, baked apples, delicious, with a little bit of cinnamon on top or whatever, or applesauce or whatever the case is. The reason why Chachamim permitted these dishes is really because we can eat this food without the intervention of the non-Jewish person, of the Eino Yehudi. And so therefore, we don't feel obliged to the cook for his assistance in preparation of these products, thereby lessening any social bond that's created by the food. Okay? That's the first category. Next category where the prohibition of bishul akum does not apply, foods whose form and taste do not change through cooking. Okay? So this applies even to food that would normally not be eaten without cooking, like pasteurized milk, distilled water. That really doesn't change through a cooking process. Okay. Next category, foods that are still inedible and require more cooking to make them edible. Okay. So this would apply to partial preparation by, let's say, a non-Jew, and the finishing process by a Jewish person, an observant Jewish person, or partial preparation by an observant Jewish person and the finishing process by a non-Jewish person. Okay. Next category of prohibition, where the prohibition of bishul akum does not apply, would be foods that are not prestigious and would not be served at a king's table, when hosting an official state dinner. For example, baked beans in a can, or cornflakes, for example, you wouldn't find at an official state dinner, so to speak. Okay. These foods are permitted because a person does not experience, deep feelings of gratitude and appreciation when someone warms up a can of string beans, for example. So therefore, cooking non-prestigious food would not bring on feelings of closeness between the person who prepared it and the recipient. Any food that would not be served at a wedding feast, for example, because it is not elegant, think of something, that would certainly not qualify for bishul akum. So we have sort of some categories of qualifications. Next, foods which are generally not eaten together with a meal or are not eaten for healthy nutrition. So, for example, candy, potato chips. According to many halachic authorities, these types of foods would not be forbidden as a product of bishul akum. Okay, that's next category. Next category, foods of any combination whose main ingredient does not qualify for bishul akum, would be acceptable as long as all the ingredients are blended together. So a great example of that would be brewed coffee. For example, what is brewed coffee? It's a combination of water and roasted coffee beans. So we know that cooked water does not really apply for bishul akum. And even though roasted coffee beans cannot be used without brewing, coffee is a prestigious beverage which is served at weddings. Nevertheless, since the water is considered the main component of the beverage and the coffee is considered flavoring, so therefore freshly brewed coffee would not be subject to the restriction of bishul akum. Okay. Next category, foods that are microwaved. by a non-Jewish person. Bishul akum does not apply to microwaved food. The whole prohibition of rabbinical prohibition of cooking, bishul akum, applies only to conventional cooking methods: cooking, frying, roasting, grilling. Food that is prepared through microwaving is not included in the prohibition. And finally, foods that are prepared by brining or smoking also would not be prohibited. Okay, so there's quite a lengthy list where the whole category, the whole concept of bishul akum, of cooking by a non-Jew, really does not even apply, and you have no problem of their involvement in those processes. Okay, so what are the common questions that we get when it comes to the idea of bishul akum? So, for example, does bishul akum apply to canned goods? Okay, and the classic answer that every good rabbi will tell you in any question you might ask is, it depends. Okay, it depends. And, canned soups and canned pasta, for example, might present a problem of bishul akum without proper supervision. Canned fruit would not present a bishul akum problem. Why? Because fruit is usually eaten raw. Okay, as long as the fruit has been processed on kosher equipment and with kosher ingredients, it would be permitted. Canned vegetables that are either eaten raw or not elegant enough to be served at a state dinner, for example, they would not have a bishul akum problem. Okay. Whole asparagus, for example, when served alone, is a prestigious food. So that would be, where there would be an issue with that. So therefore, canned whole asparagus should only be used with a reliable hechsher, because there are other issues with it when it comes to checking for bugs. But also there's the whole idea of the bishul akum when it comes to asparagus, which is more of a prestigious food. Next question you might think is, this whole idea, this whole concept of bishul akum, of cooking by a non-Jew, is that subjective? Okay, and the answer is really the whole prohibition of bishul akum can change depending upon the different culinary customs of the country or region that we're talking about in question. So, for example, canned mushrooms is really actually a really interesting example of this subjectivity. In the US and Canada, canned mushrooms don't really require bishul Israel. They don't require Jewish involvement in the cooking process for numerous reasons. The first reason is mushrooms are eaten raw. You can have them in a salad, right? Usually they're eaten raw, or you cut them up in a dip type of thing, as long as they're clean and whatnot. Two, canned mushrooms are not eaten by themselves in a prestigious manner. They're further processed in sauces or casseroles. Okay, so therefore, in North America, canned mushrooms really are not subject to the restrictions of being cooked by a non-Jewish involvement. In Israel, however, interestingly enough, mushrooms are generally not eaten raw, and mushrooms are considered a prestigious food. Okay, so the restrictions of bishul akum may actually apply in Israel. And also, interestingly enough, in certain third world countries, view potato chips as a prestigious food, believe it or not. Okay. And so, of course, North America considers potato chips to be junk food. Obviously, in countries where potato chips, reach, a royal state dinner, potato chips would also be subject to the laws of bishul akum. So there is a certain subjectivity depending on where it is. What about rice? Does bishul akum apply to rice? Okay, good question. So instant rice and minute rice are products that are fully cooked and then re-dried so that the product can be easily rehydrated, boil in a bag rice. And I personally have never used it before. I'm a big proponent of using, good rice, basmati, jasmine, brown rice type of thing. Take the extra time to cook it and enjoy it. But of course, if time is limited, there are these options available. So now these things like instant rice and minute rice that were fully cooked and then re-dried, and they basically are just being rehydrated. So these products are subject to bishul akum at the point of manufacturing, because the rice was fully cooked and would be fit for, a royal dinner, for example. Parboiled rice, what's that all about? So that's steamed with the outer shell intact for the nutrients of the hull to be cooked into the kernel. That's what parboiled rice is. The kernels are then basically pearled and they're sold as raw rice. So, for example, a good example of parboiled rice is that famous brand Uncle Ben's converted rice. Okay, so parboiled or converted rice would not be subject to the laws of bishul akum at the point of manufacturing. Why? Because it requires further cooking, which must be done by a Jewish individual for it to be qualified as that. Okay. Another question: Rice Krispies. Does bishul akum apply to Rice Krispies? Okay. So, from what I understand, the raw rice is pre-cooked before being popped into crisp rice. That's how it's made. And so the question is, would the pre-cooked rice then be subject to the whole idea, the prohibition of non-Jewish involvement in the cooking process? So when I did some research on this, the technical staff at Kellogg's explained to the kosher certifying agencies that although it is true that the rice is pre-cooked before toasting, this sort of pre-popped rice is rubbery and edible, but it's not fit for any sort of like a royal dinner or royal state dinner, for example. So since the pre-cooked rice is technically edible, although it's not appealing, any subsequent process, including popping and flavoring, would not subject the rice to the restrictions of bishul akum. So nothing to worry about there. And not furthermore, popped rice here, like Rice Krispies, really it's you're going to hear this term quite a lot. It's not ole al shulchan melachim. It really doesn't go. It doesn't take its place at a royal table. Rice Krispies, that type of thing. Okay, so those going about it sort of from what is not involved and some of these questions. As we said before, when an observant Jewish person has played an integral part in the food preparation, that product is known as food that has been prepared through what's called bishul Israel, literally food that is cooked by an observant Jewish individual. Okay, and the cooking processes requiring bishul Israel are, we said before, boiling, broiling, baking, frying, deep frying, roasting. Okay, some examples of foods requiring bishul Israel include soups, shish kebab, roasts, rice pilaf. Okay, there are some notable exceptions that are, bread products that are baked commercially. Bread and cake products have separate laws governing their use, and that would be a different class. We'll talk about that another time. Pat Yisrael. We'll just touch upon it a little bit here. Okay, so the whole process. How can we achieve it? What's the minimum we need to achieve for something to be considered as being, cooked or having had, the involvement of an observant Jewish person? So really, we can achieve the whole idea of bishul Yisrael can be achieved in one of two ways. First way, the food is placed in, let's say, in a cold stove or cooking apparatus, and then an observant Jewish person lights the fire. Okay, that's the most common way. And second is the fire or pilot light, for example, in an empty oven is first lit by an observant Jewish person and remains lit continuously. So after the pilot light is lit, the food can be placed inside by anyone, okay? And so, if you were to choose two methods, the first method really is the optimal one because that gets done from the beginning. But if there's a pilot light that's already on, and our policy at the COR is, once every 4 weeks, we relight the pilot lights. To make sure that there's, even at its core, there's always a Jewish involvement in the cooking process. Okay. So there are some other, with that in mind, there's some other questions that come up when it comes to, the Jewish involvement in cooking, or what's called bishul Israel. So, for example, if a pilot light is burning continuously, how long can it remain lit without any, Jewish intervention, so to speak, and still be considered bishul Israel? Okay, so all right, I told you our policy at COR is once every month we relight them. So the truth is, if the pilot light is directly heating the stove or the pot, as the old style pilot lights of a gas oven, the light can burn indefinitely and still retain the status of what's called bishul Israel. So that's can be out forever. Technically speaking. If the pilot light indirectly lights the burner but doesn't add heat to the food, like as the old style central pilot light of a gas cooktop, then there should be some sort of consultation to determine if it should be relit every time, by Jewish involvement, even though the pilot light is burning continuously. And that's probably where we have our policy of relighting the pilot lights every so often, periodically. Okay. Next question: Can bishul Israel, can that be achieved by setting a timer that's going to ignite the oven at set intervals. Maybe, what if a Jewish person comes along, sets the timer, you've done it. So the quick answer is no, it cannot. Why? Since the observant Jewish individual does not perform direct lighting of the oven, it would not qualify for Bishul Israel. Okay? In a commercial setting, such as hotels, hospitals, or factories where you have sort of large boilers provide the steam for the cooking equipment, the Bishul Israel requirements would be fulfilled if the observant Jewish individual flips a switch or presses a button that directly ignites a boiler. If you see it with fryers, for example, you hold on to the button that sort of activates the pilot with the match and whatnot, and that goes on. Now, so basically, if the action that is performed by the observant Jewish person causes an indirect lighting of the oven, that action actually may not qualify for Bishul Israel. So, for example, dialing a number that in turn trips a switch that in turn lights an oven. That's called the grama, and that would be in terms of the Talmud, and that would be basically an indirect action that might not qualify for Bishul Israel. So you should get guidance on that for each situation. Next question. Sometimes you have what's called a glow bar or a glow plug. Would a glow bar or a glow plug that's turned on by an observant Jew and was burning continuously qualify for Bishul Israel? Okay, and so the minimum requirement in halacha for Bishul Israel is what's called hashlachat kesam, which basically is literally throwing a small chip of wood into the fire. Any minor action that contributes heat to the cooking process would qualify for Bishul Israel. So, for example, let's say you're somewhere in the Middle East, in Iraq, for example, and you come across, sometimes they have these stone oven where they're cooking in the open, making pitot, right? The pitas. And the guy in the pita making the pitot, he's got just the flour, he's got the water, he's got nothing else around. The ingredients are good. You could literally come along, pick up a piece of wood, throw it into the fire. The next pitot he bakes are considered pat Israel, Bishul Israel, and you can eat those pitot, no problem whatsoever. Okay? So, and in fact, that is essentially what's done in a lot of countries today. I know in Morocco, for example, it's still done today. Some of the communities that are still there do that process. Okay? So that's that. So if the oven would be hot wire so that a bulb or a glow bar could be placed into the oven cavity, and then basically turned on by an observant Jew and left on permanently, the additional heat given off by the light bulb or glow plug, which is considered like a fire, that would more than qualify for the idea of throwing a piece of wood into the fire, and basically that would fulfill the requirements of Bishul Israel. Okay. Now, if an oven was lit by an observant Jew, was subsequently turned off, but remained warm until being relit by a non-Jewish person, would the status of Jewish cooking or Bishul Israel, would that be nullified? That's the question. Okay, so the answer is, as long as the oven remains warm, the status of Bishul Israel remains intact. The minute it starts to lose its strength, its heat, and I think the technical temperature is maybe 200 degrees at that level. Once it loses its heat, then basically it loses that status. It's really interesting to note that when it comes to this whole idea of Jewish involvement in cooking, we tend to be, as Sfaradim, even more strict in these terms. Okay, it is interesting to note that there is a unanimity between the Beit Yosef or Yosef Karo, who was the author of the Shulchan Aruch, the Jewish Code of Law, and the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserlis, who was the halakhic authority of the Ashkenazi Jews. He also wrote a Shulchan Aruch at the same time as Rabbi Yosef Karo, yet he deferred his Shulchan Aruch to that of the Beit Yosef of Rabbi Yosef Karo, and instead he added his addendums as reflecting the customs and the laws in Ashkenazi communities within the code of Jewish law, the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, and literally Shulchan Aruch means the set table. So the whole set table of laws of whatever you need to live and function as a Jew in the world is in the code of Jewish law. So there is unanimity between the two regarding basically the whole idea of throwing a piece of wood into the fire as having this transformative ability. And when it comes to B'Shul Israel, so for example, like I said before, the Beit Yosef. Yosef Karo very clearly maintains that the lighting of the oven criteria applies only to bread. So like the pita example, according to Sfaradim, that's perfect. However, in order to perform a significant action to qualify for Bishul Israel, for cooking that is, quote unquote Jewish cooking, so to speak, the observant Jewish individual would have to actually put the raw dish into the hot oven or on top of a cold burner and light the fire when the uncooked item is resting on the burner so as to fulfill the criteria of what's called Bishul Israel Sfaradi. The Bishul Israel, according to Sephardic qualifications, okay? So there has to be a little bit more involvement than just turning on the fire. There has to be some involvement of placing the pot, moving it around, mixing it around, so to speak. These different involvements are very important. Whereas the Rama, Rav Moshe Isserles, he counters and he posits that whatever qualifies for bread, like the throwing in the piece of wood into the fire for the pita example, that would qualify as Bishul Israel as well. And really that is the position of Ashkenazi Jewry and for the most part of all kosher certification agencies in North America. Okay, so you may find, for example, if you're if you find yourself in a kosher restaurant, there are some people that might ask the mashgiach, Sephardim in particular, who understand these laws, they would ask the mashgiach, could you please mix the pot or be involved in the cooking process a little bit more, so it qualifies as Bishul Yisrael Sfaradi. Okay, so how does this dichotomy between the Beit Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, and Rav Moshe Isserles, the Rama, how does that really manifest itself in the industrial settings of kashrut? So, for example, an example would be a canning company. Okay, companies that can foods. So, a canning company uses what's called either a hydrostatic or a stereomatic continuous cooker. And what that means, basically, it automatically feeds cans of potatoes or yams, and I'm using these examples because these are examples of products basically which would be present at a state dinner, a royal state dinner. Okay. Or if the company uses a conventional basket retort where uncooked cans of potatoes are placed in baskets that are pushed into a torpedo-style cooker. So this is the two examples. So in such cases, lighting the boiler by a mashgiach would qualify for what we call Ashkenazi Bishul Israel. That would be enough. Just light the boiler and everything's good to go and is considered Bishul Israel. But it really would not be effective for Sephardic cooking requirements, or Bishul Yisrael Sfaradi as it's called. Okay. Now this would not be an issue for corn or string beans, which can be eaten raw. Okay, and the term in Hebrew is ne'echal kemot shehu chai. It's eaten. It can be eaten raw, and that does not require Bishul Yisrael. However, in the case of a vegetable such as white potatoes, for example, or sweet potatoes, vegetables that can be present at a royal state dinner and are not eaten raw, the lighting of the boils would not be effective for Bishul Yisrael Sfaradi. Similarly, in a kosher restaurant or catering commissary that is certified by the best kosher agencies, complete with the best, kosher supervisors or mashgiachs, the fires of the stove or the oven, the soup kettles, are religiously turned on before the cooking even begins, which is great, and that's amazing for Ashkenazi. But for Sephardim, we need sort of a little bit more. And unless the mashgiach, puts the uncooked food, that cannot be eaten raw, and it qualifies for a royal state dinner, for example, such as rice. He has to, unless he puts it on the fire directly or moves it around, or the raw roast beef or the uncooked chicken into the oven to cook. So he's doing an action, not just turning on the fire. It's not going to qualify for Bishul Yisrael Sfaradi. So we see, we're very sort of particular in this idea. So one way that has been found to address these challenges for Bishul Yisrael Sfaradi in a factory, commissary setting, or a restaurant is to have the raw items placed on the stove or in the oven before the fires are turned on. That way you sort of, get two birds with one stone, as they say, and you perform the action of both. Okay? Okay, good. Now, interesting question is with rice and couscous, okay, in a factory setting. How is that going to pan out? So both products, when it comes to rice and couscous, are, let's say, totally cooked and then dehydrated, okay, with cooking instructions that call for recooking before eating. Talking about that type of rice or couscous. So does dehydrating a product a second time remove the stigma of bishul akum, of a product requiring bishul Israel? And so, this question, for example, is not a new one. It was actually raised, you know, many years before in the response of what's called the Avkat Rochel, which is recorded by the Yad Ephraim, another halachic authority. And in the responsa, the product in question was basically cooked wheat kernels. All right, the cooked wheat kernels. I know we have the custom on Shabbat in the chamin. We'll put wheat kernels, or in the cholent, as they call it. We'll put wheat kernels. I know Ashkenazim put barley, put wheat kernels, and then we have by Spanish background they call it horisa. It has a nice flavor and comes out really nice on Shabbat. So basically, the wheat kernels that are cooked, where the wheat kernels were cooked to a point that qualified for bishul akum, in other words, being cooked by a non-Jewish individual, and subsequently they were dehydrated to an inedible point that then requires recooking. So the question is, was the original bishul akum, that prohibition nullified because now it's dehydrated, it has to be recooked again? So based on the response of the Avkat Rochel, the Yad Ephraim states that a resounding yes, it was nullified. Okay. Now, for example, and so it seems obvious that instant rice and couscous might fall into the same profile. Okay, so with both products, the instant rice and the couscous, they could be fully hydrated and edible in cold water with no further cooking necessary. So now, if it's cold water that does it, then maybe that bishul akum, that cooking, non-Jewish involvement in cooking that was done at the beginning, maybe that is not nullified in the case of rice and couscous. Okay, so in the case of domestic instant rice, that it's easy. Part of the Hashgacha protocol involved the mashgiach turning on and constantly monitoring the multiple boilers of a rice company, so that's fine. In the case of couscous, the monitoring is more difficult, and the question is whether couscous is now considered, something that can be, placed at a royal state dinner, and it is. Couscous is not eaten, So the first answer given was like, the couscous is not eaten alone, is prepared with oil, other vegetables. So really, it doesn't really have this quality of being subject to bishul akum because it's mixed with other things. Okay. And it may not require other preparation. So maybe bishul akum status is not there anymore. Okay. Or another approach that was thought of in halacha was couscous is more of a home food. It's not really served at fancy functions, but that's not really the case because caterers do serve couscous. It's actually quite a fancy food, and so essentially, what happens is the end result when it came to these things is that you have to have the involvement of the mashgiach, with the couscous, both turning on the fire and placed on the fire in order for it to be qualified for a full, bishul Israel or bishul akum, that bishul Israel quality, both Sephardi and to satisfy both Sephardic and Ashkenazi opinions in that case. Okay, and that really sums up the whole idea of cooking, the cooking process, and our involvement. And I said it from before. I said it before. It seems, of course, beyond the understanding that we don't want to inadvertently, God forbid, consume foods that are not kosher. And Chachamim also thought of developed this idea of limiting our connection, so socialization, so we don't lose our people, so to speak. I think there's also a spiritual aspect here where there's an involvement, at a certain spiritual level with our food. We are, as a people, the Kashrut laws give us an intimate connection with our food all the time. And it's not just something we think out, we do haphazardly. Our eating is not haphazard. It's done with mindfulness. It's done with awareness, with a consciousness that, everything we absorb, not only is it on a nutritional, physical, functional, nutritional level, it's also on a spiritual level as well. Any questions so far on that?
Excuse me, Rabbi.
Yes, Grace.
If there's a product, say like rice or couscous, that just needs boiled water, can a non-Jew just put the kettle on and switch it on?
So it needs boiled water. Oh, so you need to add the boiled water? The boiled water?
Right. Say if you just need to boil water and add it to whatever, mashed potatoes, whatever it is, and that makes up an edible product, does a Jewish person have to plug the kettle in? It's
Good
not a
question. So
flame as such. It's not a
it is not a
flame
flame.
as
You're
such.
right. It's true. Nonetheless, so in that case, it would seem because it would seem if if we're just re-adding hot water, it would seem we're talking about couscous or rice that's been already cooked and dehydrated, and we're adding the water back in. So it would seem fine that you wouldn't have to. I mean, ideally, I would say that perhaps when if the kettle's turned on, but when you're adding the person adding the boiling water into the couscous, and I'm saying couscous in particular, not the rice, the person adding the couscous, and you're going to add some salt and some pepper and some parsley or whatever you're adding to it, whatever. So that process should have some sort of Jewish involvement because there is a more of a cooking that goes on there type of thing. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Anything else? Okay. So let's move on. Here we go. So the keto diet. Let's talk about the keto diet. The keto diet has swept the country with promises of, reversing diabetes, of weight loss, and so the question is, in the luster of the diet, we have to consider the following question. Is this too good to be true? And like any number of fad diets that have come and gone over the years, the keto diet seems to have more marks of wily marketing and a lot of enthusiasm that's unbridled than really of a real medical therapy. Okay, so anyone that's really toying with the idea of adopting a ketogenic diet really should listen this evening and may want to be careful before wasting their money and their time, or God forbid, their health as well. And we're going to talk about that. Okay, so for those who are unaware what a keto diet is, the ketogenic or keto diet is a diet that excludes all carbohydrates to the point that the body derives its energy from principally from another macronutrient, fats. Okay, followers of the keto diet do not eat whole grains. They do not eat legumes or fruit. Why? Because of the carbohydrate content of these foods. Okay, even some vegetables contain too much starch to be allowed in the ketogenic diet. Okay, so as a result, the body now extracts energy from fats that are consumed in the diet, which create these byproducts called ketone bodies. Okay, it's a byproduct of the metabolizing of fats, and that's the name ketogenic diet. Okay, so you'll have a lot of evangelists of the keto way, the ketogenic diet, telling you the Inuit or I'm pronouncing it right, the Inuit or Inuit, whatever it is, they survived and they thrived on nightly fare of seal blubber, of whale sirloins, caribou jerky, all these things, while being in the purportedly in a nirvana-like state of ketosis. What's called the keto flu, for example. That's the common phrase for the symptoms of malaise, of nausea, fatigue, that people who regularly diet with the ketogenic diet, that's what they get, and you're going to hear that. So, and the truth is that the Inuit certainly ate those things. Of course, farmers markets are scarce in the Arctic because, well, there aren't any vegetables. There aren't any vegetable farms in the tundra, but we also have to understand that they also developed, their bodies developed mechanisms over time to avoid ketosis altogether. Okay, what happens is there was a mutation that occurred probably thousands of years ago to prevent ketosis in the Inuit population. Okay, and the mutation, this genetic mutation, is now found in more than 80% of Greenland and Canadian Inuit. Okay. Now, because the keto diet increases acid levels in the blood, okay, the hypothesis is the following. The hypothesis is that ketosis reduced the ability to tolerate further acidosis, further acidifying of the blood during times of illness, injury, or complete starvation, thereby increasing the chance of death. Okay, that so many Inuit have the mutation strongly suggests that ketosis was perilous for the Aboriginal inhabitants or the indigenous inhabitants of the Arctic, and likely, is perilous for anyone else on the diet as well. Okay, so that's the sort of the fine print that you don't read about people saying, "Oh, the Inuit they ate keto all their life," type of thing. Look at them. Okay, the truth is, it should come as no surprise that anyone that the ketogenic diet really causes vitamin and mineral deficiencies. After all, there are large food groups that followers simply cannot eat. Such as whole grains, most fruits. Okay, the rules for maintaining ketosis are so strict that an extra helping of broccoli might push you over the carbohydrate limit. Okay, and the truth is, the only people who should be on a ketogenic diet for whom it was developed for are children who have refractory epilepsy. Okay, that's really where the diet has been used as a therapy to reduce seizures for nearly 100 years. Okay, researchers have been studying the side effects of the diet in this population, including vitamin and minerals deficiencies. In one study, researchers found deficiencies in every vitamin and mineral analyzed except for vitamin B12, which is commonly found in fatty foods of animal origin. Okay, and the severity increased with increasing ketosis. In some cases, deficiencies in selenium, for example, that is found mainly in grains, were so severe the children died on the ketogenic diet. Okay, so that's really who it's reserved for. Okay, so study after study has shown an increased risk of death with low carbohydrate diets, and the ketogenic diet maintains the utmost supremacy, so to speak, in carbohydrate restriction. In a recent study published in The Lancet, for example, a prestigious medical journal, those eating low-carb diets and relying primarily on animal-based foods, such as lamb, beef, pork, we're talking about the non-kosher here, and chicken, they were associated with a higher mortality. Okay? We already know that eating animal-based foods, such as dairy and meat, increases the risk of dying. Okay? The keto diet, in particular, also worsens levels of both good and bad cholesterol, which puts a person at risk of dying from heart disease. The foods that the keto diet excludes, fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, are some of the healthiest foods around. Right? It's no wonder that the risk of dying goes up when you leave these foods off the plate. Okay? So let's see. The question is this: does the keto diet really keep its promises? The keto's claim to fame is its almost mythical ability to treat diabetes and obesity. And the truth is, long-term studies show no real benefit for diabetes. Although studies of short-term duration, we're talking about less than a year, frequently show a benefit in the treatment of diabetes. There was a meta-analysis, which is basically an analysis of many studies, lasting more than a year, showed no difference in blood sugar levels of those on the ketogenic diet compared with people control who are not on it. And what about weight loss? So, there's basically a 2-pound advantage over a low-fat strategy after 1 year of counting carbs. Okay, 2 pounds of weight loss is really not enough to make you look that much more, svelte, so to speak. All right, there are saner and safer ways of losing 2 pounds over the course of a year, like eating a whole food plant-based diet. And again, I tend to be an evangelist about that in particular. Okay, so even if you do believe that the keto diet works for weight loss, there actually are plenty of other reasons to avoid it. Okay, in reviewing the literature of the documented side effects in epileptic children on the diet, I found that patients suffered from no shortage of side effects, including kidney stones, restricted growth, fatal cardiac arrhythmias, inflammation of the pancreas, higher cholesterol levels, lots of other things. The diet seems to be worth utilizing only if one happens to be a child, again, with refractory epilepsy. And even then, children discontinue the diet because of its numerous side effects. Okay? So like I said, it seems like there's this, this cycle where now this is the fad now, a miracle diet. And maybe it's already, I said, coming to an end since we now are entering into the Ozempic syndrome, Ozempic society now, and that's a whole other class for another time. But it might be that the ketogenic diet only brings more disappointment in the long run. There's a saying, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. All right. But you actually need, but don't, but not if you need actual medicine to support your food. That I would add to that. Okay. And so essentially the ketogenic diet seems to be sort of a short-term band-aid solution. By removing carbohydrates from the diet, basically you're simply removing a trigger that leads to symptoms like hyperglycemia, too much sugar in the blood, without addressing the actual cause. And then when you add back the carbohydrates, your body can't tolerate them, which makes it seem like the carbs are bad for you all of a sudden, but really they are actually the victim of something else. So, after really, going down this whole rabbit hole of research when it came to the keto diet, it turns out that basically you have the ketogenic diet seems to cause a high amount of accumulation of what's called intramyocellular fat. So fat in between the muscle cells of the muscles. Okay, it starts to accumulate. Okay, and that causes the cells to become dysfunctional, leads to insulin resistance. It also leads to impaired tolerance of glucose as well, of sugar. Okay, I've seen numerous keto advocates demonizing carbohydrates because they personally cannot tolerate them. Once again, it seems like it may seem like the banana caused your blood sugar to go up, but what it really did was trigger a symptom that was caused by a much deeper problem. So after becoming aware, it's really the large amounts of saturated fats that are being eaten, the eggs, the chicken, the meat, full fat dairy, coconut oil, that really causes insulin resistance, and that's where you have to be very, very careful. So, my goal, I'm going to leave you with a challenge tonight, a goal. If you're looking to really make a change, really, really look at sort of dropping your fat intake. If you're in a high range, try to drop it to 20% of your diet. Remove all animal foods and oil as much as you can from your diet. Focus on getting healthy fats from avocados, from raw nuts and seeds. Okay, add whole grains and legumes into your diet. Okay, and have an abundance of all types of fruit. Okay, and I really, really think, and again, based on my reading and research, probably within 48 hours, you'll see the sensitivity of insulin return to normal. Within a week, you'll see, your what's it called? You'll see sort of insulin is normal. Even diabetes will be more controlled when you're having a lot of these sort of whole grains and legumes, and healthier fats back in the diet at a minimum level. Because all of a sudden now the body can use, and the brain principally uses carbohydrates for energy. So now you're feeding the brain what it needs. So that's really my take on the keto diet. Again, personally, I've been through sort of different eating journeys when it comes to sort of weight loss. I've been through, a sort of a medically supervised ketogenic sort of type of diet, whereas, again, stay away from carbohydrates and having proper and just lean meats and lean proteins. And I just found that it didn't sit well for me. It didn't sit well with my cholesterol and cardiovascular profile. It was really only when I switched to the whole foods plant-based approach that I saw personally everything from better strength, energy, and weight loss and everything else that came with it. So that's my take for this evening on the keto diet. So beware, especially when there's a fad and when there's a fashion or something that's trending. You really want to sort of take a step back and look at it and research it and see if that's the right thing you want to put your body through before you go through it. Any questions?
You've given us a lot of food for thought, Rabbi.
Yes. Yes, there's a lot of people, whenever you say, oh, I'm cutting back on meat and dairy, and people are like, where do you get your protein from? Thinking, where do cows get their protein from?
Exactly.
and they build big
Exactly.
muscles. So I don't understand this.
Yeah, exactly. There seems to be an emphasis on protein in our society, in our generation, or whatnot, more so than anything else. And the truth is, we get great amounts of protein, from combinations of legumes and whole grains, as more than is necessary.
Oh.
And with the amino acid profiles and the vitamin and mineral profiles that complement each other, to making it digestible and being well assimilated in the body and well balanced and bioavailable. Yeah. Hi, Stan.
Hi. Sorry, I just got a bit delayed tonight, but I just wanted to ask one question with regard to supplementation.
Yes.
How do we know that what we should really supplement and whether the supplement's actually working or not? Because I understand that sometimes people say that if you take supplements, that goes in and out your body, it doesn't get absorbed, and so what are the supplements you think that are essential to take, and how to take them so we can be sure that we're actually getting some benefit from them?
Excellent question. Yeah, and there's always a sort of an argument in the supplement world. Whether you're just basically paying for fancy looking urine when you take B vitamins and all these different fluorescent type of thing. Your urine, all that stuff. The truth is, if you are maintaining a good amount of good amount of intake of fruits and vegetables. I'm a big proponent of juicing every day. For me, the juicing seems to helps to cover a lot of nutrient profiles and what I need for nutrients. If you can't do that, then you want to try to find there are good quality vitamins out there. Again, the sort of the jury's out. It seems to be the jury's out when it comes to multivitamins, for example. But I don't think no one's ever lost by taking a multivitamin on a regular basis. So, especially if you're not getting enough on a daily basis, a good multivitamin is really helpful. I tend to sort of lean more towards liquid-based vitamins, which are more bioavailable than tablets, which have a lot of fillers. If the liquid-based vitamins are available, then I'll lean more towards capsule or veggie capsule, based vitamins that again that are more easily break down in the body. Essentially, it depends what you want, So it also depends on the time of the year. So I tend to sort of the basics. I tend to sort of make sure everyone has when it comes to my office is our extra vitamin D. For example, especially living in Canada, we have long winters. We don't have that much sun. We're not exposed to the sun as much. So extra vitamin D is very important. Vitamin C as well is super important to have as part of your good diet profile. I tend to be a big proponent of good quality B vitamins, considering the stress that we're always under in our society, whether it's work stress, whether it's emotional stress, or any type of stress. So B vitamins tend to sort of shore up our emotional and our strength, adrenaline, adrenal gland strength. So those are the three I tend to take care. I tend to sort of focus on the most. Change of seasons, I'll add zinc as well as preventive to keep the immune system primed. And then with those maybe and then having either a juicing regimen or doing a multivitamin if you can, or a liquid multivitamin, which I tend to prefer. Okay. If you're not getting, if you find yourself very low in the having a low fats type of thing, or you're avoiding a lot of fats and oils, then you may want to consider an algae-based essential fatty acid supplement that's also healthy and also is vegan or vegetarian friendly, I would say.
Thank you. So just one question is, do you have like a particular resource, like where one can get liquid multivitamins or liquid vitamins? Because the only ones I've come across seem to have hechshers that are not the best hechshers. Are there like some references or sources that you could send me?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I could do that. For sure. There's some companies out of Europe that have acceptable hechshers. I know Floridix, for example, is a company that's out of Europe. They have some good acceptable hechshers on their products, and a lot of their liquid-based vitamins are sort of herbal and liquid-based. So and they're very palatable. Those are good. There are some that are made in North America with some good hechshers on them, and again, with a lot of the vitamins, again, you want to sort of ask if you come across, a vegan-friendly vitamin that doesn't have a hechsher on it, but yet it's vegan, it has no animal products, and you want to, if there's a question, if it's in a capsule form, it's not being consumed as a food, there may be a leniency, a permission there to have that because you're not taking it as a food, taking it as a medicine. We tend to use that. That's a halacha, for example. If you're taking a medicine in a capsule form, it's not a food, so there's leniency there for that. As long as and add to that, if it's sort of vegan based or vegetarian based, the vitamin, then there's a permission there as well. But yeah, Floridix is one of them. There's some other companies I can sort of send you some information on as well. Kosher Vitamins, I think .com is a good resource. Trees Nutrition out of Montreal. Trees TREEZ nutrition.com or .ca. They might be a good resource as well. I think they're out of Tosh, Hasidim out of Tosh, that have a vitamin business going as well. And yeah, I think more and more, it's a good idea. Take a walk through Whole Foods, see what's there. If you have a chance, on a quiet afternoon or on a Sunday or whatever, go through a good health food store, get to know your health food store, see what brands are around. And you'll start to sort of see, what different qualities, and we could talk about that, either in person or at a class time. That's also a good idea.
But as a general rule, you're saying that if you can get liquid vitamins, you're going to get a better absorption, more likely to get better absorption.
I tend to do that more. Yeah, I tend to sort of go with that approach more, definitely. So yeah, so with the liquid vitamins, yeah, definitely. So the Floridix one as a brand from Europe is pretty good. There are a couple other brands I don't remember offhand that have hechshers with them that are liquid based as well that I can send you some information on as well.
Because I used to get Floridix, and then I was told that the hechsher on the Floridix wasn't the acceptable one.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
But now now the one in Floridix is okay.
As far as I know, I mean, I've consulted a couple of times and was told that it was acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. That gives me something to work on. But yeah, if you do have any, should I send you an email with everything?
Please.
Yeah,
definitely.
Okay.
Okay.
But the ones that are not liquid, like, how do we know that we're actually absorbing and we're getting what we need from them? Like, I've got these brands called Mega Vitamins. Mega Foods. This brand called Mega Foods. It's kosher and it's but I don't know if I'm absorbing what I'm taking.
Right. So it's very simple. You are the sort of the best judge of yourself. So as I am with myself, if I put myself on a regimen of certain vitamins for, let's say, 4 weeks, for example, religiously, I'm taking it 4 weeks on a regimen of a certain vitamin, and then I'll stop it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and I'll see if there's a difference in my reaction, in my body, in my energy levels, in anything. So for me, I mean, I tend to gauge that. Has it done something for me? Do I feel a benefit from having taken it? Or do I not?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Oh, thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Shavua Tov, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Bye.